Losing sucks, but not all losses are created equal. And that is not just true in life, but also is true in the sport of college football. This loss for Nebraska was their worst in terms of margin of defeat since their 56-7 loss to Indiana last year. That was a negative 49 point differential for the Cornhuskers. This game was a negative 18 point differential. And in between those two losses, Nebraska suffered a 3-point loss to Michigan, a 3-point loss to Iowa, a 7-point loss to UCLA, a 8-point loss to USC, and a 4-point loss to Ohio State. This again being the worst since that Indiana game. And I want to dissect this loss, some things that I noticed in a rewatch that I did where I watched every single play, and a few things that I picked up from that. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and this is dedicated to Cornhusker fans and also to the Nebraska channel Corn Crazed that, in responding to a super chat I sent, told me that he wanted me to dissect Nebraska and give suggestions and give analysis as to what needs to be done. This is my best attempt at doing that. Before I continue, liking the video, watching the video all the way through, and commenting your thoughts down below are the best ways to support the channel, as they help push me into the algorithm, help me to receive a larger paycheck that I can use to reinvest in producing elite analysis for you all. Subscribing to the channel, hitting the notification bell, sharing the video around, and supporting us in other ways that you can find out via the description are other awesome ways to support our operation at College Football with Sam. We are becoming the best. We want to be the best. Thank you all for making that possible. So, what happened in this game? Why did Nebraska get destroyed in the second half? Why did they lose by 3 scores? And what changed? Because Nebraska entered this game ranked 25th in the AP poll. They entered with a 5-1 record, 2-1 in Big Ten play. The betting line for Nebraska opened up at -5.5, and at one point the line was up to -9.5. There was a lot of sharp action, a lot of confident and well-resourced and knowledgeable money behind Nebraska, not just winning this game, but perhaps controlling the Minnesota Golden Gophers and winning their first back-to-back road games in several decades. What happened here? Well, I think the first place to go is to discuss who Nebraska is as a team overall entering this game. And Nebraska, while I respect them, and while I think that they are this year a talented team, they're in year 3 of the Matt Rhule era, they had high expectations entering the year, and I picked them initially to win 8 games, 9 games. My final end-of-year record prediction was that they would go 10-2 and get snubbed from the playoffs due to a pretty weak schedule and losing to Michigan, which has been proven correct. I picked Michigan to win when it came time to do that preview and prediction video, maintained my preseason prediction was right there. And I also picked Penn State to beat Nebraska preseason. I don't know if that's going to happen. I thought Penn State would be this amazing team. They're not. They're 3-4. Despite thinking that Nebraska could reach double-digit games, I thought that they would do so by way of winning several close games. So you see that in Cincinnati this year, that panned out. Michigan was a close loss. Michigan State, at one point it was a 3-score lead for the Cornhuskers. However, you also have to consider that at one point in the third quarter, Michigan State was up 21-14, and it looked like Nebraska was about to fall off the rails. Maryland on the road, that was a close win. So Cornhuskers 2-1 in close games entering this Minnesota game. The Michigan State game was, I think, closer than the final score indicated, and it's not like against Michigan or Cincinnati that Nebraska was definitively the better team that whole game, and you get the close win where maybe someone scores a garbage time touchdown, makes it look closer than it is. For Cincinnati, it was pretty back and forth. Nebraska led for much of the game, but at the end, Cincinnati had a drive going, Sorsby throws a pick, and Nebraska wins. For Michigan, it was actually Nebraska who made the game look closer. Michigan was definitively the better team from about the second quarter onwards, if not for a late touchdown when Nebraska needed an onside kick recovery to even have a hope at winning. If not for that late touchdown, Michigan would have won by more than one score. So Nebraska, as the season goes on, you get this painted picture of something good, something that's improved, but something that is not great and not ready for the college football playoff. And I, from a preseason angle, agreed with that they would be this good team but not great. I did think that because of whether some special teams improvements or my opinion on what they brought in on the offensive line and what they returned there, they would be able to take advantage of some of their strengths to win the majority of their close games. And while they have won some close games this year, and they have shown this clutch ability, they do not have the level of game control or even the potential to game control their opponents that I may have thought they were able to from a preseason standpoint. And you see that on their schedule. And for the rest of the year, it is going to be important that they are able to find a way to control their opponents and mitigate their weaknesses, which we will talk about here. Northwestern, this Saturday at noon, I think Nebraska's going to win, but I think it's going to be a close game. And Northwestern has a pathway to win, particularly with some of the pass rushers they have and the fact they have a rushing offense and a good offensive line. USC, that's going to be a chore if USC is healthy, especially. Any road spot for Nebraska after that Minnesota game, after the Maryland game where multiple interceptions were thrown, that's the two-game sample size we have for road trips, Maryland and Minnesota, where I think Nebraska looked porous on average when you combine the results of both those games. Raiola throwing the 3 picks against Maryland, Maryland being able to run a little bit on Nebraska, and for Minnesota, just the offense only outputting 6 points was pretty bad. I do not trust Nebraska on the road after that 2-game stretch. I have a very hard time trusting them. So they are going to have to make improvements. Thankfully, they get the bye before the Penn State game in order to go on the road and win those games. And then Iowa at home, Iowa has had Matt Rhule's number. They have had Nebraska's number. Iowa has not lost in Memorial Stadium going all the way back to, I believe, the last time they lost there was either 2013 or maybe 2011. I think it was 2013 was the last time Nebraska beat Iowa at home in Memorial Stadium. And Iowa, their lines of scrimmage play is night and day different from Nebraska's. Iowa has players on the offensive line and defensive line that a lot of your top schools, your top teams in the country would love to have, that they would die to have in starting positions, not just in their 2 deep. Every top team would love to have some of Iowa's trench players, if not all of them, somewhere in their rotation. Some would even die to have some of those players starting for them. I know Ohio State would probably like to have one of Iowa's tackles at their right tackle spot opposite Austin Sareveld. Penn State would trade places with Iowa's entire trench play. Michigan would love to have some of the players Nebraska or Iowa has O-line and D-line. They'd also like to have some of Nebraska's receivers. Let's not kid ourselves. And the same goes, I think, for most schools in the Big Ten and in the nation with Iowa. But those games are further down the road, either this Saturday or several Saturdays from now. So I want to focus more so on the here and now and some takeaways from this loss. And we can first jump to areas to improve. Some things that I watched in rewatching every play and looking at, really it's a highlights package where you watch all the offensive plays, all the defensive plays, and you just take out the time in between the snaps and you take out the commercials. Really condenses down the game. So in watching that, some of my takeaways from Nebraska's loss are that their trench play is a problem. Nebraska has issues all around, but I really think it starts at the lines of scrimmage. So I think a great example to really hit that point home is Dylan Raiola, and how a lot of people are talking about how he hangs onto the ball too long. Mark Gronowski even mentioned it in a interview, talking about, the Floyd of Rosedale Trophy game between Minnesota and Iowa, and someone asked him about how Minnesota just had 9 sacks, and Gronowski pointed out, yeah, Raiola holds onto the ball too long, and I agree with that. However, there are instances where, and several instances, that's why I'm bringing it up, there are several instances where it's not just on Raiola. Think about Shedeur Sanders at Colorado. Shedeur Sanders held onto the football way too long, and that was his downfall. It's also his downfall in the pros. He has not adjusted his game to the pros. He was a talented quarterback in college who never really grew his talent, and his talent wasn't Caleb Williams level, wasn't even J.J. McCarthy level, certainly not Jaden Daniels level. So you have good talent, but it's limited, and you don't play to its ceiling, you're not going to survive in the pros. But to be fair to Shedeur Sanders, he never had a great offensive line. Colorado last year in 2023, they could not run the ball. They were not strong up front, and it's not like they held up well in pass protection either. I think there's something similar going on here, where the weaknesses of the quarterback and the weakness up front, just all across the board. So Raiola has areas where he's strong. He has areas that he excels in. I think when Raiola's internal clock is going, and he knows that you can't hold on to the football forever, he makes great improvisational throws or improvised scrambles. I think that he's not consistently seeing the field, and he is not consistently trusting his receivers or the offense. Some of that might be due to the fact that we have, really first-year coordinators on both sides of the football, but in this case, the offense. But when he does, when he trusts his receivers, or when he, trusts the protection, or when he is aware in the pocket and he's not running into defenders or just standing there and kind of staring his receivers down or staring down the field and not really caring about what happens around him, he makes some awesome throws, where that one play where he was about to get sacked and he just kind of shovel passes it forward for about 10, 11 yards. That's fantastic arm strength. That takes raw natural talent. Where after the Elijah Pritchett targeting, which was one of the stupidest penalties I've ever seen all year, he evades pressure, gets down the field, showcases, I think, some, impressive juke moves, avoids a defender, and instead of taking a 1 or 2 yard sack, he gets down the field for about 10, 15 yards to make Kyle Cunanan's job easier. He does some things very well. And I think he throws a beautiful deep ball. I think he throws a beautiful ball, period. There were not a lot of bad throws from Raiola. And when there were, it kind of showcased his talent, where he had an open receiver, Dane Key, I think early third quarter, or maybe it was late second quarter, and he overthrew him. But that showcased his arm strength. And if he just toned down the strength a little bit on that throw and the oomph, it was perfectly accurate. It was just 5 yards ahead of Dane Key, exactly where he was going to be, just 5 yards ahead. The point I'm trying to make is that Nebraska's offensive line doesn't do anything well. They don't run block well. They rarely got to the second level. They rarely got off of the defensive line for Minnesota, and they didn't get much leverage. They're not strong, and they are also, I would argue, underqualified in a lot of ways, where they really struggled picking up on linebacker or safety blitzes. Some of that's on the running backs and pass blocking too. Just the whole operation for Nebraska's pass blocking is subpar, just about everywhere. You don't have a good pass blocking running back from what I know of, or Emmett Johnson, the main running back, who you want because he is by far running back number one. He's not excellent at pass blocking. the offensive line, whether it's tackle, whether it's guard, whether it's center, they don't do a very good job picking up stunts. If it's just a straight rush going forward, sometimes they can hold their own. But even then, they often get pushed back. They don't do a good job maintaining the pocket or allowing Raiola to step up in the pocket because they're getting pushed back that often. I think a lot of that's on coaching because it's not like they're starting anyone under 300 pounds. All of them are 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", outside of their center, who's 6'2", and he was highly rated last year, and he's above 300 pounds. They're not undersized. They don't lack talent. I mean, Rocco Spindler started on Notre Dame's offensive line last year. He did pretty well. And there's just something off in that unit across the board. They don't run block well. They don't pass block well. They don't do much, if anything, well. That was the biggest glaring weakness. And I think that plays right into Raiola's weakness, which is trying to play hero ball, trying to do too much, wanting the big play, wanting to, uncork his talent. There's a lot of these young phenoms want to, as any quarterback, let's be honest, any quarterback wants to do that, especially if you're Raiola and you're not Lamar Jackson, or you're not Jalen Milroe, or you're not any of these high caliber athletes at quarterback, in the sense of you can't be run first. Sometimes quarterbacks, if you're struggling through the air, or you can't really get protected. So Michigan in 2023 against Penn State, they used J.J. McCarthy at times more as a runner in that game than a passer, because the offensive line couldn't pass block, but what it could do well enough is run block, and they had a good enough rushing offense, and McCarthy was nimble enough and quick enough with his feet and tough enough in the sense that he would seek contact sometimes in the ground game, where they could use him to add on to the offense. They could use him in a different way offensively. And with Raiola, you can't exactly do that. Raiola's not a quarterback that you consistently want to run the zone read with. He's not a quarterback that seeks contact when running. I mean, one of his final sacks that he took of the day, where he just 2 seconds in the pocket is all he was afforded, and he just slides down to avoid the hit. Smart on his decision to not take another hit when the offensive line wasn't protecting all that well for him. But also, he's not someone who's going to seek contact. He just isn't. So you have to support him in pass blocking. He is a pro-style quarterback. He is a passing quarterback. He is not a dual threat quarterback. And that does not blend well with what Nebraska has. And I think that quarterback and O-line, they play off of each other pretty poorly. They don't blend. They don't mesh. So Ohio State, for example, their offensive line and their quarterback play, they fit like, I would say, a hand in a glove is how they fit. Ohio State, they struggle in run blocking. They struggle there. You should watch them. However, they do a good job in pass blocking, especially on their left side. And more importantly than that, they have a quarterback in Sayan who is nimble enough and aware more than his age would suggest. He is aware beyond his years in the pocket, to where he can sense where pressure's coming from and step up in the pocket, get the ball out quickly, is a very quick release. And I've even seen him scramble forward for a few yards here or get back to the line of scrimmage before being taken down. So Sayan helps out his offensive line, and his offensive line helps him out. For Nebraska, that's not happening here. The offensive line does not help Raiola out. They hamper him. But Raiola also hampers the offensive line by trying to do too much, not wanting to throw it away, and sometimes that turns into interceptions, as we saw in the Maryland game, or he runs right into the defensive end and left tackle or right tackle and gets taken down for a sack and sets the offense behind schedule. Some other notable issues are the defensive line for Nebraska. They're small. They're not strong. They're not Big Ten defensive linemen. Minnesota, I didn't notice this watching live until about, I would say, maybe third quarter, fourth quarter. But early in the game, first Minnesota run, they got across the line of scrimmage for about 1 to 2 yards. And outside of, I think I can count 3 run plays that Minnesota had, Minnesota's offensive line got ahead of the Nebraska D line and pushed them beyond the line of scrimmage. They won from the get-go in the trenches. The problem for Minnesota was Nebraska's secondary and linebackers were good enough and disciplined enough, especially with zone coverage. Their eyes were in the backfield, on the quarterback, not on their man. They were able to swallow up the rushing attack pretty quickly early. And then after some of the big plays Minnesota had and Lindsey began to figure out the zone, that's when the issues began to really flare up on defense. The team also needs to be more physical, but I think what's important to keep into perspective is that Nebraska does have first-year coordinators. So sometimes the play calling isn't perfect. Sometimes the hand is not fitting in the glove at all. It's either tearing through the glove or the glove doesn't offer, it's not taut to the hand. Water or snow or very uncomfortable things can get in there and mess it up and hurt you and give you cuts and bruises. I think a part of that's just the nature of first-year coordinators with a roster that isn't Oregon's, Ohio State's, Georgia's, Texas's. It's not even the caliber of roster that Penn State has. And I and many others overrated the caliber of roster Penn State had. So the Rhule made staff changes that I think are good in the long run. You're seeing some instant success with Mike Eckler and the special teams, a lot of it. It's much easier to, I think, flip special teams overnight, especially when you have a true freshman punter who wasn't there last year and transfer kicker who was successful at California. It's much easier to do that overnight than offense or defense where there are a lot more players and therefore a lot more intricacies and possible outcomes with each play than on special teams. So what changes do need to be made? I'm not a coach. I'm not inside Nebraska's program, so I do want to preface this with some of this is probably wrong. It might even be counterintuitive. These are just things that pop into my mind. I want to preach caution and also preach patience a little bit. So I agree that Dylan Raiola probably needs to go. And I think that this staff, especially with how this incoming recruiting class looks and how Rhule's prior recruiting classes have been top 25, sometimes a little bit behind that, but never really top 20. And not all of those players have panned out as well, which is the case with every recruiting class. But especially if you're trying to really level up this program and get to the playoffs, which Rhule has publicly stated even for this year, he even said this year's kind of playoffs or bust. I don't know if he should have said that, because even I, who thought that Nebraska was going to be a good team this year and had him winning 9-10 games in August, I thought to myself, this is, from a power rating standpoint, more of an 8, 9, or even 7-win team that just has one of the easier schedules in football. It just is. And the Minnesota game, I think, showed that it is year 3 of Matt Rhule, but year 3 of Matt Rhule has always been winning a bunch of close games and really maximizing wins against inferior competition and trying your best against better teams, but typically losing to them, as he did to Oklahoma twice in his third year at Baylor. And with Nebraska, Minnesota was just a really bad loss. But the Michigan game's a prime example of that. Michigan was a better team. You didn't beat them. You did not, because Rhule is typically a good program builder, but he's not known historically as someone who punches very highly above his weight class, like Signetti, for example. Or I would argue that, Fleck in 2019 was a better example of punching above your weight class than Rhule that same year, because Fleck beat Penn State at home, and he beat Auburn in the bowl game, like teams that were way more talented than what he had. Rhule didn't have anything like that. So knowing what you have, but also knowing that I think Rhule has made good changes, and they have been aggressive in the portal. They went after Isaiah World and nearly got him, for example. I think there needs to be patience for now. You're still 5-2 with a very realistic outcome of going 8-4. If Rhule simply goes 8-4, I think the year is a success. Anything less than that, no. But if he reaches 8 or 9 wins, that is a successful year based on what I set the preseason expectations at, and a lot of people, including Corn Crazed and I imagine Huskers Online and other Nebraska programs, did. I think Nebraska needs to use the portal, specifically on the offensive line and defensive line, and they need to recruit well there. Donovan Raiola needs to be replaced. We've discussed this. The offensive line, it's been year 3 under his tenure. It doesn't seem like any of the younger guys have really stepped up or improved. It doesn't. I mean, I don't want to be rude here, but we know who Turner Corcoran is. He's been with this program forever. He hasn't improved at all, and yet he's still on Nebraska's roster. And yeah, I think that if dramatic changes were truly made on the offensive line in a positive way from the Frost era, you wouldn't really have Frost offensive linemen there. Because outside of Cam Jurgens, who's in the NFL and doing quite well there, Frost was not known for producing good offensive linemen. So the fact that Frost recruits are still there, they're still in the 2-deep. Spindler is probably their best lineman, and he's an incoming transfer. Their best tackle, Pritchett, is undisciplined, lacks fundamentals, which was the case at Alabama. That's why he left, but it's not like he improved at Nebraska, for example. And he's their best tackle. So there just aren't areas where you're seeing improvement or you're seeing good things. It's not. In the same way that Ohio State, after their national title season, dramatically, I think, upgraded from Justin Fry to Tyler Bowen. And I think you're seeing some of that this year where Saraveld really broke through under the new staff and the best players on the offensive line. So Saraveld's their best player, and he broke through under the new regime. For a minute there, Philip Daniels was kind of their second best offensive lineman, and he was exclusively developed under the new regime there. I think Nebraska would really benefit, not just from a recruiting standpoint, but more importantly, the developmental angle. They would really benefit from having a different offensive line coach. But they also need additions in the portal. You go out and get yourself better tackles, better guards, better offensive linemen, because about half of the 2-deep are leaving, and that includes Rocco Spindler, for example, one of the better offensive linemen. That includes Turner Corcoran, includes Henry Lutovsky, the left guard. Both guards are gone after this year. And then both backup tackles, Teddy Prohaska and Turner Corcoran, are gone. And with Gunnar Katula, how he's looked, same with Elijah Pritchett, I don't know if you want both of them starting next year. So Nebraska will be in the market for portal offensive linemen. Same thing with the defensive linemen. They need bigger and more athletic players there. That's for sure. And outside of that, just other minor things are a better wide receiver 1. Dane Key's going to be gone after this year. He hasn't been totally healthy. Having a near elite to elite wide receiver, so maybe picking up a Cam Coleman or Malcolm Simmons or Eric Singleton Jr. or maybe one of the Clemson wide receivers, those type of guys, that would be very beneficial because Nebraska doesn't have that. They've upgraded at receiver, clearly, but I don't think they've gotten what they exactly wanted out of that group. They got upgrades. They got close to what they wanted, but I think they were hoping that one of Key or an Isaiah Hunter or maybe Ja'Cory Barney would really break out and be that alpha number 1. And I don't know if they have that right now. And last but not least is Nebraska needs to build the team around the players. Maybe this is counterintuitive, but you can't put a square peg through a round hole or a round peg through a square square hole. You can't do that. You can't do it. It's unwise. It causes a mess. It frustrates players. It stunts their development. Nebraska moving forward, because they actually have coordinators and head coaches and football minds, and I'm not one of those. just from an intuitive standpoint, I wouldn't be shocked if they try more RPO and they try more short passes, because this long development stuff will get eaten alive by any defensive line that has Big Ten size against this offensive line. This offensive line and this trench play overall is more Big 12 level. It reminds me more of Kansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Baylor. That's what this reminds me of, is, Big 12 trench play, and not Utah or Texas Tech Big 12. Nebraska would be very blessed to have what Texas Tech does at the lines of scrimmage, or what Utah has. They'd be a much better team with those lines of scrimmages at Nebraska, with Nebraska's skill position players on offense, with their backfield players on defense, and with the quarterback that they have. That's all I have to say in this video. I do think Nebraska will win some games, but I also do not think the losses are over. Just wait until the season's over to make your assessment, and based on the previous moves Matt Rhule has made, I am confident that he's the right fit at Nebraska. And I also do think that he will stay there for the long term. I do not believe he's leaving for Penn State, but I could be wrong. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure, if you haven't already, to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, comment your analysis and thoughts down below so I can reciprocate my thoughts with you in the comment section, and check out anything on these end screens that are up here, whether it's a recommended video or playlists for teams that I'm talking about in a preview, prediction, or a reaction. Make sure to hit the notification bell on those, scroll through them, and watch any suggested videos if you are interested. Thank you for helping college football with Sam become the best and the biggest college football brand and channel on YouTube and other social media platforms. We will reach that one day because of your support.